Welcome to Race Matters. You're listening to Joppa Radio 96.3, and we're going to delve into the funk here on Race Matters. I'm Eddie Carson, and I'm excited because we have an awesome guest. We have former mayor of Newburyport, Donna Holaday, who has stepped into the hood here. And we're going to just have a conversation with this awesome sister about, what's she up to lately, her thoughts on issues dealing with race and anti-racism, some of her work as a former mayor, particularly thinking about some of the DEI initiatives that she engaged in a lot of ways too. Before we get started, I do want to invite folks to join me next week on April the 26th. I believe that's right. I'm trying to pull this off the top of my head, which is a Wednesday at the PEG Art and Activist Center. I am really excited that sister Paula Esther invited me over there to give a talk on Imagine Communities, thinking about notions of nationalism and what does that mean? What does it mean to think about nationalism and patriotism within communities? And we're going to talk about that as it relates to local communities too, and the things that need to happen as we think about spaces in which who's invited, who's really invited, who feels like this is a community for them, or is it something that we've imagined where we think and believe that we know people just because we live within a community, but yet we really don't see nor understand where those folks are coming from, whether it's Black, brown, indigenous, queer folks, women, all the levels in which we've seen marginalized peoples continue to exist. So as we move forward here this evening, I'm going to say hello to my friend Donna. How are we doing, my friend?
I'm doing great, Ed. How are you?
I'm good. I always tell folks that, I'm a Black man in America. I'm still trying to navigate spaces, and I'm out there making relationships with all types of folks, really trying to inform, educate, and see what's going on. I tell you what, though, it got a little chilly today.
Oh, yes.
I was like, the other day I was thinking, we're past this. Don't get me wrong. 85, no, it was like 88 degrees the other day. That's a bit too warm for me. And I'm from Montgomery, Alabama. And I exist in a space that doesn't have central AC, which is a prerequisite, a requirement down south. Doesn't matter what income level you come from. You come straight from the hood, we still have central AC. A little bit more of a luxury aspect, right?
Yes.
Up here. And there are a lot of folks who don't believe in air conditioning.
Yes, we do not have central air in our home. And I didn't like it in my office either, because it was too loud.
Yes.
I hated the boxes. It's just inefficiencies, the smell. No.
So you don't do air conditioning at all?
No, we don't. We had I put in beautiful ceiling fans.
Interesting. So I have,
and other than maybe those like 8 to 10 days where it's ungodly humid.
Absolutely.
We do fine.
Yeah, that's interesting up here. There are a lot of folks up here who just don't, and I get it, I understand it. I have a dog and 2 cats. They will pant and pack their bags and move out without the AC. I don't have that kind of luxury or things of that nature. Hey, so tell us a little bit, right? This past year since you've been out of office, what have you been up to? Just kind of give us, a bird's eye view and things that you've enjoyed and you've been excited about as we start this conversation about your time away from public life.
Well, thanks, Ed. My husband was very worried about, how I was going to deal with 24/7, constantly on the phone, interrupted in the middle of the night, phone calls, especially during storms. It was just nonstop and 12 years. And as I've said to many people, the last 2 felt like 4 with COVID. It was hard. It was really, really challenging to lead a city and make sure you keep things moving forward, everybody safe, information flowing, those kinds of things. So we left for Nashville right after I had left office for a extended vacation and family wedding, and it was fabulous. We had a great time, just wonderful music. Went to a new History of African Music museum that just opened up in Nashville that was just fabulous. We truly enjoyed our time there. So it's been a lot of reconnecting with people that I have neglected for 12 years, family, friends, and just, we just recently visited our son in Brooklyn and had a wonderful time, and, great food, great music. And my husband and sons are professional musicians. So it's just, knowing someone in Brooklyn, and you walk down the street and he's like, okay, we're going in here. We're like, what? And you could walk into this amazing trio playing jazz. It's just was wonderful. We saw Nathan Lane on Broadway,
yes,
which was just, big fan.
Yeah, I'm feeling jealous
Of his. So planning another trip to Europe. We've just, spent some time in the Newport area this summer. And we've been absolutely engaged in massive renovations of our house, which we haven't been able to do. It's an 1870 half house. And so, we'll probably be still cleaning up plaster, like the pine needles for another year. But, I had, replastered 3 rooms, ceilings, and now it's we've painted 4.5, and we've got 1 more to do.
Y'all have been busy.
Oh yeah,
nice.
No, it was really important that we did this work. It had been a long time coming. My husband's done a great job taking care of the outside of the house and the gardens, and he's also a professional chef, so he's cooking for me now, which is great. So it's really been nice, very, very relaxing. Able to get up in the morning and read my 3 papers and, blogs, and just, then go pick up a paintbrush. So,
I'm not a skill handy person whatsoever. The only superpower I have, though, is I can paint. Mm-hmm. And I try to do that as well and as meticulously as possible. I mean, you don't want the streaks and the line and the patterns and all of that stuff. I remember back in the day, I used to put, help me out. You coat it with the white stuff. Then primer, right? And now they have the primer mixed in with the paint.
Sometimes.
And I try to get that, and that kind of saves a lot of time too.
But when you're in an old house with horsehair plaster,
you have to use the primer.
It just sucks up the paint, like you read about.
So you have to use the primer in order for it to adhere and everything too.
Yeah.
You mentioned music, and so I'm a blues man. I'm a jazz brother. I mean, I'm a soul brother from the deep South, and that's just the way I am. It sounds like your son and your husband and your passion is for jazz music?
It varies. My husband's rock and roll.
So he's rock and roll?
Yeah.
Okay.
He was the bass player for 22 years with the band The Fools. That was out of Ipswich. Life Sucks Then You Die, Night for Beautiful Girls. He had, I think, 8 videos on MTV and albums. And
I know what I'm looking for tonight when I get home.
Yeah. So, and then Beetlejuice, Beatles cover band with Brad Delp. Unfortunately, we lost over 10 years ago. He took his life, but now he's in another band called Mike's Big Swing Thing, 20-piece band with 12 horns and 2 female singers, and they just play everything, and it's fabulous. So, and then he does little trios around the city and out of the city with local bands, just, play bars, clubs, things like that.
Absolutely.
So it's really fun. So, and he teaches here at Zach Drum Studio. My oldest son is a sax reed player, so he plays all the, reed instruments plus flute. He's picked up bass and guitar, like my husband is a bass guitar player, and my youngest is a drummer. So
just a musical family. Do you sing? Do you play instruments?
You do not want to hear me sing.
You're better than I am. Trust me.
Yeah, no. I was in theater most of growing up, is what I did. So it was more dance and theater and that kind of drama, as opposed to singing. But
So y'all are just a arts family.
Mm-hmm, very much so.
So when you think about music, what are y'all to-go places to listen to music if your husband's not performing, or even if he is?
I love Blue Ocean in Salisbury. I think
it's very familiar.
One of the, and I had really tried to push a developer who was working on our waterfront to try and do something like that in our city, because I think we could use it in addition to the firehouse, which is small. But love that. Certainly, any shows we go to in Boston. Hadn't been to the Paradise in a long time.
And I've never been.
It opened when I was in college. I was doing my first master's at BU, and it was a great place. And my son's in a band, which is really starting to launch. My youngest, the drummer, called Weird Fishes, and they got to play at the Paradise in December, which was awesome to see him play there. And my oldest did the Urban Nutcracker at the Schubert. So, they're really starting to, come into their own in terms of their music. So it's wonderful. Hard to get my husband out to a club because he has spent so much of his life in clubs. But,
Right.
But I'm pulling him in
Put
that
it
way a little
slowly
bit.
and
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah.
There's a place that I recently started going to up in Portsmouth called Jimmy's.
My son told me about this place, yes.
It is fantastic. It's you can order meals. It's quite large. There are bars, different things. The stage. I've discovered it's hard to eat food and listen to music. You're giving me a look. Just
It depends.
for me,
It depends on the music, I think.
Yeah?
I do. Sometimes.
The lights go out. And,
Right, and then it's like, where's
Yeah, I just
get your focus there on the music. yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I'm a fan. So I'll tell you, probably in thinking about classic rock, I'm a fan, and I have been probably since, I don't know, maybe before high school. Rush, and of course, you go to that sound you see or hear in what's the song, Tom Sawyer,
Sure.
from Rush,
Yeah.
and that's one that I can listen to all the time. But for me, I always come back to jazz. I miss the fact that I could have heard Herbie Hancock this summer, which would have been fantastic. He's probably on that Mount Rushmore with folks like John Coltrane
Sure.
or Miles Davis. So then if we're talking about music, I've got to ask this. Are you a cassette person, 8-track person? I'm having fun here. Are you a vinyl person?
Move through all of those.
Are you like a Spotify person? You listen to music on YouTube? Where do you get your sounds from?
We have returned to vinyl, actually. I bought my husband probably a few Christmases ago a new turntable with a USB. So then, and so he's set it up. Well, we had to take it all apart when we were plastering and painting, but it's been, I really like vinyl. I like the sound of vinyl. I don't do Spotify because they don't pay musicians. And I really think that, artists, are really having a hard time in this world, especially coming out of COVID. Yeah. And, it's wrong that they're not getting the kind of reimbursement that they deserve.
So I didn't know that. So if you have, and just for the record, I don't have a Spotify account. Essentially, if I listen to music, I'm a vinyl person, right? There's something about the craft, the art of placing that vinyl into the vinyl player and sitting down and chilling for a little bit, having to get up and flip it, right, after a period of time, and just the way that crackling sound that goes along with it too. But with the Spotify, I didn't realize that money it's not really distributed at all.
Well, I guess very little,
right?
In terms of what artists should get. And I know it was probably a year ago, there was a fairly big controversy, and various people just pulled their music and refused to let them play their music on Spotify as a result of that.
I remember this. Absolutely. So, folks, if you're listening, you have a judgment decision to make and everything as it relates to not telling you what to do and what to think, but the information is good to kind of get a sense of what's going on here and everything, too. Besides your husband and your kids and their bands, what's your probably all-time favorite classic rock band?
Oh, that's a hard one. I'm a huge David Bowie fan.
Oh, David Bowie, yeah.
Seen him 4 times.
Nice.
That was one thing about going to school in Boston. I would stay up overnight and wait in line to get tickets at the Garden, and I'd be in the, saw the Allman Brothers, Emerson, Lake and Palmer.
Love the
Fleetwood Mac.
Love the Allman Brothers.
Yeah.
Oh,
We could go
yes.
on and on and on.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, you can't go wrong with all of that stuff. When you were mayor here in Newburyport, right, you engaged in a lot of great initiatives as it relates to things related to DEI. And and as we get to that question, I just want to kind of probe into your background just a little bit and answer what you want to answer. You don't have to answer anything you don't want to answer. But do you recall growing up, maybe your first experience really observing racism in this country, something that kind of just really shook you in a way that it kind of lived in your mind, and you may have multiple tales about that?
I think Martin Luther King's assassination.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think any of us can forget that, where we were when, that tragedy hit our country. King, the beatings in L.A. I mean, these are...
I remember that one like it was yesterday.
Yeah, I mean, these things were, part of my upbringing, and it was a very different, we didn't have cell phones and internet, and, you were glued to watching, Walter Cronkite and, really solid newscasters giving you information about what was, going on in some of these really tragic situations. That was hard. I think I was fortunate in that the fact that I grew up I've always been on the North Shore. I grew up in Marblehead.
Okay.
But
yep.
Marblehead had the Metco program.
Yes.
And so I went to a parochial school from K through 8, and throughout that entire time, we had students of color coming from Boston to integrate and be educated within.
And this
our
is true
school
even at a
system.
parochial school.
Yeah.
So I didn't realize that was part of Metco, because I always thought it was just a public school program.
Well, it was there throughout Marblehead. So, and the parochial school also was part of the program. So, and I think that was a really important experience, to go to school in an integrated setting where, a lot of these North Shore communities growing up are white.
Yes.
And I remember taking my older son, who was probably 5, into Boston to see the Christmas lights and the Garden and all of that. And we're standing on a sidewalk, and Afro-American mother with her little daughter, who was about his age, and the two of them are just staring at each other. And I'm like, this is really bad. We've got to get out of Newburyport more often.
And your son is doing this like, who is this?
Right.
Because I'm just not used to seeing a black person.
Right,
and
big wide eyes and,
Yes.
and looking at her, and she's looking at him, and I was like, this is not good.
So when you, in thinking about, your upbringing with the Metco program and everything too, I'm assuming your school was predominantly all white.
Yes.
Okay. What was that? How do you recall that reception and how it felt as you're seeing students of color being bussed in as they're working on integration?
This was post the huge busing issues.
Right back in the 74.
Yeah. So in terms of that piece, so this was, I guess it just felt just very natural to me.
Yeah.
And I remember having an issue with some of the females who felt that I was becoming too close and too friendly to one of the Metco students.
Oh, so I want to delve into that for a little bit, right? So say a little bit more. So I'm assuming that you befriended someone. Sounds like someone who's probably African American, becoming close. Was this kind of like a overlay kind of racial attitudes that black and white people don't congregate and hang out, or?
This is part of our group,
Yes.
and you can only come so far, and you've crossed the line. Is kind of the way I interpreted it, and I had a hard time understanding that, but I accepted that. I'm sure it was a challenge. I mean, these were kids who got up at 5 in the morning, rode on buses for hours and hours, spent all day in a different community, and Ended up getting home late at night and having to repeat that. It's not an easy program, but certainly I have a huge high school reunion coming up and look forward to seeing some of these students of color who continued through the Marblehead system.
No, that's interesting. It's, when I grew up in Montgomery, Alabama, which, today Montgomery is, I want to say 57% African American, Black, and people can check my stats, but I'm pretty sure I'm right. We got our first in the 240-year history of the city, and this is going back, I think, to about 2017. Yeah, not 2017. This is going back to probably 2018. We elected our first Black mayor in the city of Montgomery. And in Montgomery, one of the things that I remember quite a bit is that I went to an inner city public school. There were Black and white folks who congregated in this school, but yet we had to have things such as a Black homecoming queen, Black homecoming king, a Black homecoming queen. Then we also had to have a white homecoming king and a white homecoming queen, and and all of this kind of stuff. I think there was saying it would be like valedictorians. So it was still segregated in a way because they felt like there was not any kind of real justice there where Black people would not be seen in those particular positions that was there. I mean, that was the reality that we faced. I mean, you're talking about a city that is quite diverse, that's highly segregated. I always tell folks that Brother King said that, America's most segregated at 11 a.m. on a Sunday. All right, and we still find that the white folks go to the white churches, the Black folks go to the Black churches. And it's been a while since I've lived there. I visit there. I have a lot of family who's still there. I think some of those attitudes have changed, but there's a level of persistence of that still exists. Do you think that persistence from the past, thinking about segregation and integration in the North Shore, is still here?
Oh, yes, I do. It might not be as overt.
Yeah.
But I think I get surprised sometimes with people that I thought I knew well and interact with, and then all of a sudden something will come out, we had this summer program, and these kids were coming from Lawrence, who were white, Black, and brown, and they were playing basketball. I couldn't believe they were playing, in our neighborhood, and I didn't know how to respond because it just surprised me.
Absolutely. Oh, of course, you're making that mental note. I just don't think this friendship and relationship or whatever this is going to continue in that way.
Right. So I think it's not quite as. I really don't think it's as overt as it in some of these communities, but it's still very much there.
So would you say, and again, not to put you on the spot here, but because this is your home, this is your community, you're a leader within this area, that there are, Newburyport is a very affluent, highly, and I know Newburyport hasn't always been that way, but it's a overwhelmingly white community, and a lot of that has to do with economic forces too. Right. Do you think that plays a role? Do you think there are attitudes and economic elements that continues to keep this community in many ways segregated?
I do. I think our housing is I remember when I was mayor when the first house sold for $1 million. Oh. I mean, if my husband and I didn't buy our house 30 years ago, I would not be living in this community.
So the mayor,
I couldn't afford it.
The mayor of Newburyport wouldn't be able to afford to live in Newburyport.
Right, and you have to. Yeah, as
right. Yeah, you have to live there.
But I recall when I was running for city council, so that was probably 02, 03, somewhere around there. That's not that long ago, 20 years ago. Interracial couple buying a home. He's a physician, and I forgot what her work was. So she met the realtor first, and then the homeowner saw
that they're an interracial couple,
and they wouldn't sell the house to him.
here in big old progressive liberal Newburyport, right?
Yeah, I mean, and you look at the situations that we've had. There's incidents that have popped up. There's too many that I probably can't count them all, of situations where there's been mother-daughter of color who've been attacked.
Out by the along
the rail trail.
Yeah, on the rail trail. That's right. That was a big story. I remember hearing about that. I think around the time we're hearing a lot of this Trumpian stuff come up and everything, and some people shouted out the N-word and harassed a mother and her little kid. Over that situation. There was the situation, I believe, was it Dunkin' Donuts, that made some news, where some racial overtures that were made there. So I can't remember why he went back to get some donut holes or something in it, and he was giving them out to people, and this guy just like went after him, and it floors me in this day and age. I mean, I remember. It was probably around 2099. I was the faculty advisor with a group of students from Middlesex Community College, and we went to study in Northern Ireland and the Republic, and we'd have classes in the morning at Stramellis University, St. Patrick's College, and then we'd go out and look at what we were studying and learn so much about the Troubles and what happened between the Catholics and the Protestants, and it was amazing for me. And this is just when I think McCarthy, the senator from Maine, had brokered the peace agreement there. But listening to mothers talking about, you must be taught to hate. Yeah.
It's not, it's not part of us. It's not, aggression could be, we could get into all kinds of conversations about that, but that, I had this long conversation with a mother who lost two of her children and talked about, the hatred that was there.
It was real. I'm just going to go on record to say that I am no fan of Margaret Thatcher, and anyone who knows me knows I'm not a fan of Margaret Thatcher. And I heard her come to my college and give a talk, and even then, some of the things that she said about the Irish, and particularly denouncing Irish people as terrorists. And this is going back, I want to say this was probably around mid-90s when this transpired. And I was sitting there thinking, so how is that going to solve the real issue that's taking place, particularly because of that whole Catholic Protestant element, right? And some of it has even migrated to the United States. Actually, it is here in the United States, like a lot of things. But to your point, living in communities, living with family who teach people not to love, not to invest, not to want to congregate with other folks who are not like them, whatever that means, for what I would call artificial reasons. Religion, in many ways, is, you can say, it's somewhat of an artificial construct, though that's your belief, like race, like a lot of things. And those seeds are there, and they continue to manifest themselves, like the interracial couple. This is the first time I've heard this story, that we're denied being able to buy a house because of their race. It was
very subtle, of course.
Well, it always is.
Right, because there had to be, there was some reason that the deal wouldn't go through. I couldn't even believe that I was hearing this story.
I remember, and we all recall these small incidents and situations, even at the time we don't know about it. When I was in the 6th grade, I had a friend, I won't mention her name. She and her brother, White, were friends with me and my brother. And so I remember I was really excited to go to the movies to see an Eddie Murphy movie. And so the movie was like PG-13. And so this is back when you had to look at the newspaper to see what was showing. What was playing and all of that stuff. And I remember her calling me on a landline because there were no cell phones. Right. And she said that her father said that they could not go to the movie because it was rated R. So, of course, I'm staring at the newspaper and I'm telling her, no, it's not. It's fine. I would learn years later that her dad wouldn't let her nor her brother go to the movies with us because we were black. And it was devastating too for me because her father was my little league basketball coach who I really liked.
Wow.
And so he knew us. And we it's not like we were strange folks, and yet the color of our skin just usurped everything that he knew about us in one moment. And much like your friendship with a African-American male and folks not wanting you to congregate with someone who wasn't a part of it. This is a billion-dollar question here, but what do you think it would take to really integrate a community like Newburyport here in the 21st century, to make it accessible to people who are not white, people who don't live here, who would like to live here? I mean, Newburyport is one of my favorite towns. It's gorgeous, right? It's a nice place to hang out. I like the restaurants, the shops, but they're, and I still get my share of stares at times when I walk down the street. Because there are not a lot of folks who look like me in this hood.
Right. I think it's housing is really the big issue. Was thrilled when we did the ribbon cutting for the Minko property.
Yes.
To see some diversity there, which is exciting. And I'm not sure how far along they are with the second building, and there's a third coming, so at least that was in the plans. And it's really nice to see that there is some increased diversity there also.
And was there any pushback to that project? People get concerned about no pushback at all. That's good.
No, not at all.
I had always wondered about that.
Yeah, no, not at all. And I also am really, really proud of the two churches in our community who help the, Afghan families who come and settle here and are integrating very well, I understand, at this point. So I unfortunately didn't get a chance. I think they're still selling some of the crafts that the families have made and would like to help and see their work and support. But I'm very excited that went so well, and it was a little disconcerting when I first got the call because they were renovating the churches to make them work, and they really weren't designed for residences. And so I'm talking to the building commissioner, and I said, it's 6 months. You will make this work.
I love it.
At all costs.
I love it.
There's, but I said, just make it work. And then one of the fire, who does the alarms and checks and you do, I said,
just make it work.
6 months, make it work.
I love that iron fist, right? Because when it comes to justice, that's the kind of stuff that it takes. And, that's the work that's happening and work that we've all followed quite closely, which is really, I think, really one of the more positive stories, right, that's taking place here, which is really great. Right. I think one of the darker stories is when thinking about the Universal Unitarian Church here, when the Black Lives Matter banner was taken down and just destroyed. Right. We don't know who did that. I don't believe we know who did that, but obviously it was a sign of hate that transpired there. But the way people kind of came together and stitched it back up, so we celebrated putting it back on the front of the church, right? And illustrating this notion of, this is what community looks like. It's not imagined when we reject folks for whatever reason, right? And again, we know when we think about the plight and the rights and the reality that Black lives do matter, and we know that is an interracial element that's there.
Right.
So
I think the other thing that I am really pleased that we've been able to advance and keep on an annual basis. I think there was, obviously COVID had an impact, but to run an annual iftar.
Yes.
It's has expanded and expanded and expanded, and there's a real tremendous community turnout. And I was Afroza City Councilor Khan and her husband.
Who there, I will say this, I don't know if I can say this or not, but I will because I know them quite well. Their daughter, who is my advisee.
Oh, nice.
Absolutely.
That's wonderful.
Yes.
But they invited me to the Wayland Islamic Center a few years back, and it was a wonderful, wonderful opportunity for me to learn more about Ramadan and their faith. And a professor from BU spoke about, again, the issues that Muslims are facing in terms of the discrimination, as so many marginalized communities are. But you see little pockets, and it's really encouraging.
So with those pockets of being encouraging and everything too, I mean, would you say ultimately and overall Newburyport is a welcoming place? Like if I go to a community of color and they ask me that question, or they ask you that question, and they want to know, will I feel safe there? Will I feel welcome?
I think you'll feel safe, and I think it's hard to say. It depends on who you interact with.
Right.
I see more and more tourism of, mixed populations, diversity coming to our community, and that's encouraging. And if we can do more in terms of housing and more affordable housing, I think we can, sort of slowly begin to, make those numbers work.
So when you were mayor, we here in Newburyport, you initiated the annual Juneteenth celebration. Tell us a little bit about that work and the importance of really Newburyport putting up the Juneteenth flag and recognizing this holiday and the importance of Freedom Day for a lot of folks who look like me and folks like me who, just to be honest and transparent, I don't celebrate the 4th of July. People know their history, and that's just me. I'm speaking for myself. If you think about your history, right, the 4th of July. I mean, we think about the history of the 4th of July, dating back to the American Revolutionary War. It was really designed in many ways to, first get rid of mercantilism, usher in capitalism, and protect the institution of slavery.
Right.
That was there.
Right.
So.
Oh, absolutely. I think everything sort of became fairly significant after George Floyd's murder.
Yes.
And there were, people were outraged, rightly so, across our country. And I don't think it's all faded away as so many things do. I think that there's still tremendous efforts being made to continue, other than the governor of Florida, which we'll just we can just lop off that state. With Texas, I mean, they can just
let them be their own island if possible.
Right. Or they can unite and become their own little
absolutely,
anti whatever their latest anti stances of the day. But so I believe that a lot of people were reaching out to me about Juneteenth. A lot of people were reaching out to me about DEI, and it made a lot of sense. The schools were a little bit ahead with the work of Michael Eatman and his work on his Cultural 7 coaching.
And I know him quite well.
Oh, and I just truly, truly enjoyed that opportunity to work with him and meet him. And then, bringing in the education partners, I think that was the name of the group, that we came together and did the community read on Just Mercy, Stevenson's book, which that was really powerful. And then to take our DEI group and begin to work with some, really challenging issues. Like, for example, we had the thin blue line flag up in front of the police station.
Which I'm still perplexed because it's still in front of the police station.
Right. It is. And they brought us together. And we had to do all this by Zoom, which was really hard. I mean, when you're trying to do this work, it's hard enough, but when you're sitting, having, being able to interact and eye contact as opposed to through a screen. But they really helped us understand. I mean, we had a police officer in our group who cried and said what that flag means to her, and presented a totally different perspective.
I mean, that's interesting. So I want to hear a little bit more about that. So in terms of, so when I see that flag, I'm bothered by it. You know,
I was initially until this conversation.
Into the conversation, because I always think, and again, I always tell folks who are listening, reach out to me if I make a mistake. You know, for me, it was my understanding that that thin blue line emerged at the Unite the Right rally down in Charlottesville, Virginia. And then it kind of became this symbol of something else that was adopted in a lot of ways. And I was always troubled by it. And, you know, when I see it from my perspective, my point of view, I always thought, well, is this anti-black? But it sounds like from this police officer's perspective here in Newburyport, she was saying
it represents their work. Yeah. And that the people who they've lost in the line of duty, and that it's important, and it means a lot to her and other police officers. And I hadn't thought about it from that perspective, because I had heard about it more from your perspective.
Absolutely.
And I, said to our marshal, what the hell is that flag doing flying?
Right there.
And so we had a conversation about it, and then he came and participated in this conversation, and we broke up into Zoom groups and whatever, and were able to work through some of that. But and I'm grateful for those conversations, because I think it helps to understand a different perspective, and that's, I think, what we have to do more of, listen.
Do you think that's needed even more here in Newburyport and a lot of other communities, really more intentional, or the intentionality of bringing folks together to talk about challenging issues, to hear each other? Because oftentimes we say we should listen, but maybe there's not enough space to have those conversations.
Right, and it's hard. And to get people to come, and usually it's the people who you really would like to come and really could benefit from the conversations are the ones who are there.
Absolutely.
But, hopefully they'll pick up on, listen to Ed's show on the radio. Or, so it's, you have to, I think, come at it from as many different perspectives as possible. So you have, great work being done in the schools, and, with the superintendent, Sean Gallagher.
Yes.
And you have the DEI now. We have, I was a little worried that they were going to cut the budget after I left in the DEI, but they tried to, and then they realized, well, we need a coordinator, and you just eliminated her salary. Tina Lowe's, who's doing a great job.
Well, and I want to give a shout out to Tina, because Tina is awesome, and I'm going to work with her and her committee on thinking about the Juneteenth planning for this year and everything too, because Tina she's a workhorse.
Oh, yeah. She's great. And so she was really, when I asked her if she would take on this role as coordinator, because that, I think, was one of my greatest challenges as mayor, is that I had my fingers in so many things, and you have to be able to delegate, because you won't be able to follow through. Yes. And that's really critical, especially if you're going to be doing things like Juneteenth ceremonies, Indigenous Peoples Day, and et cetera, et cetera. But Tina was like, well, I'm and she just took off, and she started attending workshops and reading, participating in Zooms, and, got herself really up to speed with what was happening with a lot of these DEI, because it was everywhere. Yes. All of a sudden, it was just like, well, what's DEI?
Right. People are like, I'm just hearing this language for the first time. That's been around for ages and ages and ages.
We've always talked about inclusiveness, we've talked about equity, but, never in this formal way that, companies and trainings were coming in, and people were popping up as consultants like Michael Eatman and yourself, and participating in these kinds of dialogues. And it's been, really, really wonderful, I think, for our community, and hopefully it will continue.
When did you work to create the DEI Alliance?
I'm trying to think. We were still in COVID. We were doing everything on Zoom. And I think it took a little longer because because I wanted people to submit resumes and a cover letter.
Yes.
And to, really demonstrate that they really
have a passion and a knowledge.
And they're willing to give 4 hours a month to this minimum to do the work. And so we, had some fits and starts, trying to move it forward and create a mission statement. And I'm sorry, I don't remember the exact time. It's kind of a blur.
No, that's okay. Absolutely.
It was probably 19, maybe 20.
Yeah, which it makes sense when you think about timelines and everything too. I mean, and I really like the work of the DEI Alliance. I was recently invited to attend a filming and a panel talk about the arts and disabilities. And I forgot the name of the school over here. It's escaping me on Low Street.
The middle school?
Yes.
Yeah.
And it was wonderful. We watched a 1 hour film that was put together and a panel of folks who struggle with their own disabilities. And I like to think about it as kind of being part of their superpowers as we really think about this. And it was wonderful. Right? And the turnout was good. It would have been nice, as I always tell people, if more people had come out to support this. But just the initiative of thinking about the fact that when we think about diversity, we think about equity and inclusion, justice, all of those things, we need to think about all forms of diversity and why we should champion that. And the fact that the Alliance was doing that kind of work, because it's a weak spot for me. And particularly on my campus in the work that I'm trying to do and thinking about disabilities and the things that, as I reached out to some folks on the committee to say, hey, you're going to come to my campus because you're going to help me do a better job of that kind of work.
That was my work for 20 years.
I love it.
My first master's was in speech and language pathology, and I ended up at a state institution. And for the first 2 weeks, I'm walking around going, what have we done? Why are all these people here? And finding people who are just deaf, people with cerebral palsy, people who had no business being in a state institution and in our state mental hospitals, which were also so I spent 20 years taking people out of these facilities is what I did.
Well, we know the 80s wasn't kind, particularly. I'm just going to have to say it as a historical fact, going back to Ronald Reagan and just cutting budgets and really and shutting down a lot of those institutions. And of course, we found people, instead of getting help, they ended up in prison.
Or they wound up in being absolutely, taken advantage of in these like dilapidated boarding houses that they were with 3-4 people paying tons of money. But my focus was more for those who were eligible for direct services from now the Department of Developmental Services or other people, so that, they would have some funding attached and we'd create homes or reconnect them with families. And, some of the most challenging individuals in our state were those that I had worked with for over 20 years. And then I decided to go to law school, do something easy.
So I'm gonna say this, and you're gonna give me a look, but it sounds like you still have a passion for this kind of work. Are you sure you're done being in the public eye?
Don't know yet, but I needed a break.
Okay, nope, that's what. Okay, so you needed a break and have to figure that out.
And it's also important, I think, and it's trying to be respectful for the new administration.
Right.
Whether the positives or negatives, and the calls that people were making, it was like, I needed to let the new administration sort of grow and learn and succeed and fail and all the things that happen when you take a new position. And, the last thing you want is, the former mayor roaming around City Hall being in your face. So
I don't want my predecessor running around behind me.
Right. So, and so it was important for me also just to decompress and take some time away. And as I said, reconnect with families and friends. But, I'm sort of putting feelers out a little bit at this point. And, who knows? I don't want to work full time again. Full like 80 hours a week by any means, but I'd like to do some consulting work, or maybe, I haven't figured out what that is yet, but...
Well, you haven't been out of office that long, so we want to give you some time to catch your breath and, read some books, listen to some music, travel a little bit, and figure that out.
I've talked to Kim Driscoll, who I was fairly close with, being peer mayor, and also known Maura Healey very well. And
I'm excited that sister is the governor.
Andrea Campbell, it's just like, it's all good. And, just said, if there's a border commission you'd like to put me on, let me know. So I've sent my resume in. So I'm just little feelers.
Yeah.
At this
we'll
point.
See. So as we get down to the kind of the final aspect of the show, because it's amazing. It goes fast when I'm having a fun, dynamic conversation. One question at the top of my mind I wanted to ask you about, and I think beyond the issues of housing in Newburyport is a huge issue. I feel like this is almost like a luring you back into politics with this question here, but is the issue of climate change and thinking about the North Shore in Newburyport. I teach a course at my institution on climate justice, and we've done some studies and we've looked at scenarios where, there's a chance in 50, 60, 70 years that this area is going to be underwater.
Right.
I mean, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, your concerns, and maybe your hope for the future that that's not the case when we think about this form of justice.
It's absolutely critical, and it was something that where I could step up and be part of groups like there's an international group of mayors who focus on climate change, and as a result of being part of that organization, you get resources and you learn about what other communities are doing, and how Arizona with the most consecutive days of temperatures over 100, and what are they doing to address those kinds of things. And I was invited to attend an international conference on climate change in San Francisco. 9 languages were spoken.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Jane Goodall was there, and I mean the John Kerry. The list of speakers and presenters. It was a phenomenal conference, but it's where I really began to understand the impact of the indigenous people who have had the least footprint in terms of impacting climate change, and they are the most affected. And that was just quite an eye-opener for me. I hadn't really thought about that because I was thinking so much about Plum Island. And,
right, and that's the first thing that comes to our mind when we think about this.
You start thinking your own community and
Yes.
what you're dealing with. But I pulled together a really strong resiliency committee, and we put together what I think is a very, very, very solid resiliency plan for the city. It's scientifically based, lots of maps, research. Really great group of people who put this together, and that committee still is going forward. We have more work to do in terms of ensuring that laws are changed so that you're making sure that people aren't building in the wrong places and doing the wrong things. I don't know about Plum Island right now. They've got a respite because of the dredge.
Yep.
But that took 10 years to advocate for that, to get it to happen again. And I'm not sure what's going to happen, but we're fortunate that we do have the Great Marsh, because if we didn't, Newburyport would be Situate.
Well, it's interesting too, and I'm sure when you're driving down one at times, and you just see all the water in the marsh, and it blows your mind when you see the water and the levels of water that's already there, that's kind of been creeping in from the ocean. It's just frightening.
And then what happens is that in 2015, that amazing winter we had where we lost the sewer system.
I remember that winter.
Yeah, we lost the sewer system on Plum Island for 3 weeks and evacuated 180 people to
So
hotels.
I didn't know this story.
Oh yeah, that was wild. And but what was happening is that it was so cold, and we got a foot of snow like every Sunday for 6 weeks, is that the marsh freezes and it can't absorb the water. And so it starts kicking back. So places that we didn't have flood before, were flooding. And it doesn't keep me up anymore at night, Plum Island. I'm still, as a citizen resident of Newburyport and, former mayor, certainly very concerned about where we're going in terms of the future. And, part of that had to do with the work we did on the wastewater treatment plant. It was a massive rehab, and making sure that we were able to put the kind of protection and revetment there for the rail trail as well as the plant. Same thing with the bulkhead, which holds up the boardwalk downtown along the water. We did phase 1, but now phase 2 is going to elevate it further in terms of addressing climate change. But there has to be more resources for municipalities too. And what did I hear? Maura Healey is bringing back which was Governor Baker's municipal vulnerability program today.
I heard it on NPR.
Yeah, I listen to NPR all the time. So. So I'm happy to hear that that program is continuing because it's really important, and we got some good grants from that that really did help our city, and more people need to be able to find the resources they need to be able to protect their communities.
Do you think, in terms of all the great work that you've done, all the work that's continuing to happen as we start to think about climate justice and the reality of that, is it your sense that citizens of this community are educating themselves on the reality of what this means for them?
Yes.
So you feel, people are taking this quite seriously.
Oh, I believe so. In fact, if you look at, our local paper, some gentleman from a neighboring community, another, anti-climate change person, but they're narrowing.
Absolutely.
In terms of the numbers. But somebody, went after him today and said science, gave him the facts. But I really do, because I see just simple things you can do, like composting.
Right.
Black Earth picks it up once a week. You pay $1. Come on, that's 60% of your trash is food. And you could make a big difference by reducing, so, I mean, everything you can do to reduce your footprint on this planet is really important. So, and I really think that people are making a difference, and I think the bike lanes are tremendous. And once we can finish the section by the Rotary to make that area safer, I'm hoping I can get back on a bike again.
I know, right after your
Surgery,
injuries,
yeah.
yes, to your shoulder.
But I got to
your
get
arm.
rid of the 20 speed. I got to go with that old grandma bike, with the
And that's
basket.
But that's okay. But you're still out there doing it, so we'll take it whatever way we can possibly take it. Well, Donna, thank you so much. Joining me here on Race Matters. This was fun, and you really hearing your energy and your knowledge, and I think that I think you have a lot to. I'm willing to pat myself on the back. I'll pat yours on your back and say congratulations on all the wonderful work. And I've been wanting to have you on this show for a while. And so when you said,
thank you, Ed.
I was excited just to have this conversation. And for folks, thank you for chiming in to Race Matters. You're listening to Joppa Radio 96.3. And as I always do, because I never like to have the last word, my friend Donna, I would love for you, whatever is on your mind, it can be politics, food, music, whatever, justice, this or that. What thoughts on your mind right now as we bring the show to a close?
Please don't be silent. Please don't be silent. Silence is not helpful for all of these issues that are facing not only our local community, our state, our country, our world. It's important to find a place that you're comfortable to help and support a cause that's important to you, whether it's gun violence or DEI or education or, trying to address some of these banning of books and please speak up. Your voice is important, and I think that is something I learned a lot as mayor. You have to listen, and you have to encourage more and more people to engage and be part of the dialogue.
Thank you, Mayor. This
You're
was
welcome.
super awesome, and thank you folks for chiming in to Race Matters. We will see you on the next episode. Be well.